Hi, it's Dr. Lori, and again, we're going to make you pick the most valuable. Can you pick the most valuable? I'm going to talk about all different diverse objects, all kinds of art, antiques, or collectibles that you might find at a thrift store, flea market, yard sale, out there shopping. And I do this because I want you to get it. So I'm going to start right here, right off the top with some jewelry. This is a Victorian brooch. Now, when you're at the thrift shop, you oftentimes see things that you may not know what the heck they are because now, in this year, we don't use them anymore. So things like a hair receiver, you see it's kind of a ceramic piece, it's round, and it has a hole in the top, and then the top comes off, and it's ceramic. So what that was is called a hair receiver, and women would brush their hair, and then they'd take the hair off the brush and put it in this little jar. And then over time, what they would do is they would actually pull the hair strands out. They'd put them on a table, make them all nice and neat, and they'd weave them. And what you're looking at is the result. So this is a Victorian brooch of hair weaving. So they weave the hair from that hair receiver that they've collected over a long time. I know, it's a little gross. It is kind of a little gross because, you're using the hair and, that kind of thing. But what they do is then they will have different colors or different strands of hair to make a contrast, right? So they make little flower pictures. They'd make big pictures, pretty big, right, in frames in the late 1800s. Or they'd make things like they'd put it into lockets and they'd weave lockets. Sometimes they'd weave bracelets. Around the 1865 to 1875 time period, around the time, of course, of the Civil War, and sometimes you would see, of course, locks of hair being exchanged from folks who are going off to fight and folks who are staying home. This particular piece is a brooch. It's late 1800s, and it is a Victorian hair brooch. They're pretty rare, and vintage jewelry and antique jewelry is extremely valuable. If you see a piece like this, while it may not be your style, pick it up. It can be resold for a lot of money. Value on this one, about $275. Now, it does have a metal, of course, setting, but it's the hair and the intricacy of the hair weaving is what you are looking for in terms of value. That's a nice piece. So, the next piece here, this is a vanity set. Now, a vanity set like this, you might have seen a lot of these. Vanity sets were from the days when women would put everything out in their bureaus or on their dressers. And it's kind of interesting because you might have the vanity set would have a lot of different components. So it might have a hand mirror, right? So you can really look at your face, right? I don't really like to really look too closely, where are you going to pluck, this kind of thing. So vanity sets. I didn't have a vanity set. My mother didn't have a vanity set. So it wasn't one of those things. But a lot of families, a lot of women had vanity sets. So they would have all their different components. You see that piece, it looks like it has a little knob on the top of it and then it sits in a little tray. Well, that's actually a nail buffer. So nail buffers were very popular. You also will see, of course, with a vanity set, you'll see, of course, a comb and a brush. You usually will see something that has to do also with helping you to get your boots on, right? Sort of like a boot hook, so to dress yourself, those match typically. And then you would probably have a trinket box of some sort. This is French ivory, and that's really important. It's important to know the materials. French ivory is actually an early type of plastic, and this early type of plastic happens to be highly flammable. French ivory sometimes is marked French ivory. It's called French ivory because it is trying to simulate ivory. The natural material coming from African elephants, other resources. So basically what this is called French ivory, and it's a plastic, and it was very popular in the early 1900s. So this particular set is from the early 1900s. Most people would be surprised, it's from about 1920, 1925, that this set is only worth $30 for all of it. Why? It was mass produced in very large numbers and it's of low quality materials. This is something you really got to learn when you're shopping at the thrift store, okay? Materials are going to be important. Try to understand and try to identify quality materials. I teach them to you in all these videos so you can find that piece for a bargain and flip it for more money. But you have to really make sure that you have high quality materials. The vanity set's of low quality, so hence, of course, you don't have high value. The whole set, all the pieces, about 30 bucks. All right, maybe you leave that one at the thrift store. This next piece is a pair of booties, little boots in leather for children. dates to about 1900 to about 1910, and this particular pair is from a shoe manufacturing firm or a shoe factory of the early 1900s in Lynchburg, Virginia. There are a couple places in the country that have shoe factories, and when you start to sort of look into antiques, I'm sure many of you have done this. When you look into antiques and you start to research antiques, you start to research, oh, where was it made? And then, okay, what is that particular community like? And what factory is that like? And who are the people who are in that factory at that time? So shoe factories, and everybody's a shoe collector. I don't know if you're a shoe collector. I love shoes. And even when I was a little kid, I had a lot of shoes. I like shoes. And we used to get for Christmas shoes because my parents were pretty pragmatic. They were kind of the type who were like, we've got to make sure that you get, your needs met. So shoes were always a Christmas present. And when we got older, we could select which shoes we wanted, but they would be opened up on Christmas. But shoes are a big deal. As a little kid, I even had a lot of shoes. So I'm kind of a little bit of a shoe girl. I kind of like shoes. Anyway, so having said that, this is a pair of booties. And I want to get back to this point about shoe factories, because once you start to learn about who is actually manufacturing shoes, you can see why shoes look a certain way. These early 1900 shoes are very typical. In the 1860s, after the Civil War, the late 1860s, you will actually see many women going to work in factories. And one of the factories they worked in were shoe factories because they had to actually run particular types of machines. And they had to do a lot of hand stitching. So shoes were a popular factory. One of the most popular ones, in fact, is in Lowell, Massachusetts, and the other ones are in Lynchburg, Virginia. And they would allow women to work in a factory environment. This was because these women were sending money back home after the Civil War had, of course, taken the lives of the men in their family. It's very, very common. So the shoe factory and the shoe actually production became pretty important. And this is how you can identify who made the shoe. And people are going, oh my gosh, Dr. Lori's going to tell me who made the shoe? Well, yeah, because a woman probably made this particular shoe. You can see with the detailing. You can also see with the way in which the stitches are. They're very, very small stitches done by those with small hands. Oftentimes what would happen is the cutting of the shoe would actually be done by one group, and then women would do most of the detailing. These button boots from 1900 to 1910 are worth about $25. They're not high value pieces. They're really of a type. And this makes another point. So if you're learning about thrifting from me and you're learning about art and antiques from me, I want you to remember this particular point. Functional objects, everyday objects, are usually not as valuable as those luxury objects. This is why I always say to you, fine art, furniture, precious metals, including jewelry, hold their value. Those objects that are functional objects, objects of everyday use, are not always of as high value. That doesn't, now don't get me wrong. Don't go going, Dr. Lori said nothing's worth anything. That's not what I said. I said, when you're thinking about functional objects that everybody is using, like a pair of shoes, they're not always as valuable as something else that's more luxuriously made. The everyday life things are not usually as expensive or valuable as those things that are used just for, the elite or just for luxury. This piece is a piece of green depression glass. Now let's talk about terms a minute. This is a green heart-shaped glass dish. Now, what many of you may not know, and this is what happens to art and antiques and collectibles over time, is that this had a metal holder. So this green glass piece actually went into a metal holder like a basket, and literally you would see the green glass through it. Used as a candy dish or a dish for sort of sundries, that kind of thing. And then it would have this metal piece, which has now been lost, and it would have a handle. The metal piece had a handle. And the metal piece might have been silver plated, or the metal piece might have been made of a base or inexpensive metal. All right. So this is a piece of green depression glass. There are different colors of depression glass. Depression glass indicates that it was made during the Depression era, and that is not true. So while we call it depression glass, it may not have been made during the Great Depression in the early 1930s. That's an important point. So it's called depression glass, but this particular piece is made into the 1930s as late as the 1950s because it was a popular form. So this particular form is not all that detailed, but the color is really what you're looking for. And when you're looking for depression glass, or you're trying to decide, do I buy that piece of depression glass or colored glass at the antique or thrift store, you want to think about which colors to buy. Green, pink are very, very popular. So those particular colors are oftentimes quite popular. Also, cobalt blue has its popularity in collecting groups. Different types of glass, which I talk about in other videos. Of course, iridescent glass, opalescent glass also are important. But again, they have their particular collecting popularity, right, level of popularity. This particular piece, as I said, dates to the 1930s to the 1950s, worth $60. So if you can pick this up for $2 at the thrift store, you're doing pretty well, because you can flip it online and sell it in an online auction, or maybe sell it in your Etsy shop for about 60 bucks. Are you choosing the most valuable? Did you choose it yet? We got a couple more to go. So this particular next piece is a group, and I always tell you, keep sets together. If you have a set, keep it intact. Try not to, of course, break apart the sets. Oh, well, you know, my daughter liked this part of my holiday china, and my son wanted to have a couple of, you know, bread dishes for his house. No, don't go breaking stuff apart. If it's a set, keep the set intact, okay? And here's the example. This is a 1965 Beatles lunchbox and thermos. And you're all going, oh, the Beatles, of course, that'll be really, really high. Good. I hope you've all said that. I hope you all said, yes, Beatles, really, really high. Okay. The reason why is you know that certain types of memorabilia will hold its value. Also, the Beatles memorabilia holds its value long term because they were together a long time. And of course, they were part of the British invasion, and they made a big impact, and it's the music scene. So it hits a lot of different demographics. It's not just for one particular aspect of society or aspect of culture. Everybody knows them. It helps that, of course, they were involved in continuing solo careers with other bands. It helps also that Ringo and Paul are still alive, continuing this link. So also their association with other artists, like Paul McCartney being with Michael Jackson and recording with them. And of course, of course, John Lennon recording with Yoko Ono and recording with other artists. It's really important that you have sort of the tentacles. So anytime you have the tentacles, and what I mean by that is where you have your collecting group, person, category, celebrity moving out, right? You're going to increase value of those objects, because those objects are going to be related to other people, and other people or other celebrities who also have collecting followers, right? Makes sense. So this particular lunchbox and thermos. Now there's a lot of talk about lunchboxes in the antiques world. For a long time, they were worth sky-high numbers, kind of like cookie jars, when cookie jars were worth sky-high numbers. Well, just like any other thing, the markets change, right? The markets go up, the markets go down. But anytime you can connect a particular object, in this case, this particular lunchbox, it's not only looking at the lunchbox collectors, but it's looking at music collectors. It's looking at Beatles collectors. It's looking at British rock group collectors. It's also going to attract collectors to toys, lithographed tin, you know, any of those types of things is going to be relatively important. The Beatles lunchbox has to have the matching thermos. It has to have the thermos to have high value. How high is the value? The thermos and the lunchbox are worth $2,000 as a set. From 1965, relates to, of course, their appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show. So TV collectors also want this. I want you to think about objects, and I want you to think about sort of as broadly as you can when you're looking for them. So when you're thrift store shopping, I want you to look for all of these types of objects. So this piece reminds me of a time when I was doing an in-home appraisal with two sisters-in-law. So I'm called to a house, I'm asked to go through their objects, someone has passed away, and there's two sisters-in-law and one of their husbands, and I think it was their mother, his mother, who had passed away. So the two sisters-in-laws are standing in the house, and while I'm looking around, I'm saying, well, the sofa is worth this, and you could liquidate that china cabinet, and the dining room set should be kept together, and whatever, and I'm doing the appraisal. And I'm walking through with the husband, and all of a sudden, there's a cow creamer, not unlike this one, sitting on a table in the kitchen. And the two women are in like their 50s, and they're talking, and and all of a sudden, one of them slaps the other one. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what happened, Oh my God, what happened? One said, Mom said I could have the cow creamer, and the other one said, I want the cow creamer, and they came to blows over their mother-in-law's cow creamer. And I'm telling you, this happens. This stuff happens when it comes down to objects. There was some kind of, exchange, fight over the cow creamer. The cow creamers are very collectible, quite possibly one of the most common objects that you will see in kitchen Anna. You know, that's the term for, of course, kitchen collectibles. So basically, the cow creamer is one that you're seeing here, and this particular cow creamer is from the 1950s. Now, things that have to do with cows, you know a lot about me. I tell a lot of stories about me, but you probably have heard me say that my mother's first name was Elsie, and Elsie is that very famous 1940s, 1950s, of course, games and such about the board and cow whose name was Elsie. So they had a board game named Elsie, and they had, of course, cow creamers named Elsie. I show you this one here on my table today because this one actually is the cow creamer that my mother had for years and years and years, this one. And cow creamers are very popular. It kind of makes sense. You know, it's cream and you could put it in there and then it comes out the mouth of the cow, this kind of thing. Cow creamers are so common that if you see a cow creamer, it really has to be a special one in order, in fact, to be collectible. So they usually are of ceramic. They're usually hand painted and hand glazed. Sometimes you'll see cow creamers just like this one that will have the whole body, and sometimes it'll just be the head like my mom's here. So basically what I want you to be looking for is I want you to be looking for different types. There are a lot of collectors out there, speaking of different types, who want all different types of the same thing. So that's called umbrella collecting. And that basically means anything that fits under the umbrella. So if the umbrella is cow creamers in general, then one where you put the cream into the back of the body is great, and one that you put the cream into the top of the head is also fine because they all fit under that same umbrella, or it's thematic. When I was working in museums, we always thought about that thematically. How can we put all of these different works of art together under some theme? You know, 1920s, you know, Art Deco, that kind of thing. Value on this particular cow creamer that you're looking at is ceramic. It's unmarked. It's from the 1950s, made in America, worth about 20 bucks. Why? Because there's lots of them out there. This piece is a tie tack. And I've said it once, I've said it twice, I've said it 12 million times. Jewelry holds its value because it's working with precious metals. This is a 14 karat gold tie tack. Now, all these videos that I've been doing for you and all these videos to try to teach you when it's from, can you guess when it's from? If I gave you multiple choice, my Penn State students used to love multiple choice because they had a choice, right? If I said, is it from the 20s? You'd say no. If I said, is it from the 80s? You'd say no. If I said, is it from the 60s? You'd say yeah. It's from the 1960s. Why? Love knots were very popular in, of course, the age of the 1960s. You know, the summer of love, right? You know, you think of Woodstock and, of course, that particular hippie culture, if you will. Love knots were very, very popular. Girls would knot their hair like that. And love knots as a tie tack were really pretty popular as a gift from a woman to a man in that time period. So this is a 1960s era, 14 karat gold, mind you, love knot, tie tack. And this particular piece has that solid gold. That's what you'd be looking for. This goes back to my point about materials. The materials have to be good, right? And what's easy about jewelry is it's marked. It's going to say 14K right on it. So that's what you're going to be looking for here. This particular piece, worth $125. When you're looking for pieces and when you're thinking, what's the most valuable that I'm going to shop for, I want you to look for those things that are good materials. High quality usually equals good materials. So you want to look at those types of things when you're shopping. When you're looking at a flea market, a thrift store, an antique store, I want you to make sure that you're understanding these kinds of points. Remember that size will matter. I know you're all joking at me now, you're laughing at me now, but size will matter in terms of proportions as well as whether or not you're getting a piece that's just oversized and made of junk, or if it's something very, very small but made beautifully. So remember, materials relate to size. Materials also relate to, of course, the quality of the piece. When you're shopping, when you're trying to identify pieces for your own collection, either way, I want you to look for, of course, high quality and, of course, brand names if you can. The Tiffany's, those kinds of things. Very well respected and well-known artists, or even Beatles, right? Something that's highly recognizable is also going to be helpful. I hope you were able to pick the most valuable. I'm Dr. Lori. Thanks for watching. See you next time.